Good morning, Ms. Goh Swee Chen, Chairperson, Shell Companies in Singapore, Ms. Claire Chang, Chairperson, Serene Foster Program, and distinguished guests. My name is Kaylin. I was a recipient of the Serene Foster Scholarship last year and soon to be Year 3 student at the SMU Lee Kong Chian School of Business. It's an honor to be the MC for today's event. Coming from a humble background in China, I'm very fortunate to receive my education here in Singapore ever since I was 13 years old. With a strong interest in technology and big data, I truly feel that there is a need to improve the gender diversity in the tech scene in Singapore and beyond. The Serene Foster Conference on the Move consists of a series of conferences designed to bring women from all around the world to discuss issues concerning to women in varying fields. Today, we will get to see the cities in our region through a new lens, think hard about the kind of cities we want to live in, and explore how we can help to build a sustainable future. To kickstart this conference, may I now invite Ms. Claire Chang, Chairperson, Serene Foster Program, to share her opening remarks. Ms. Chang, please.
Thank you again. We first like to thank Swee Chen for hosting us here, and also we look forward to listening to your guidance and information regarding climate action and on sustainable cities. I just came out from a conference, the World Business Council on Sustainable Development. This has been a regular topic that has emerged. And just 2 months ago, I was in Oslo for a conference again. It is about business for peace. No longer is the conversation about just big value creation on wealth. More discussions is needed that how do you do the business and how do you create wealth in a responsible way. So today's conversation about sustainable cities in Shell by the chairman of Shell is to help us learn about how individually and as organizations we can be responsible citizens, activists or organizations in promoting this agenda on sustainability. The WBCDS was looking not only at being sustainable, but also to debate on the issues of growth versus development. Do we grow as sustainable cities in any way we consider as good, and how do we evaluate what is good growth? There is also discussion on what is development for, the purpose and the pathways of development. How can we do it better? So it was a very interesting insight from the various conversations I've had the last 2 months about growth and development, about how to be then responsible. Is it through technology? Is it through values? Is it through various measures that we can learn from each other, through good practices to promote sustainable growth and development? Those are the questions that we are surrounding ourselves with today, and there will be some breakout groups afterwards that Swee Chen has actually outlined after her presentation for us to deliberate. I do not want to dwell just on gender diversity and gender challenges. I think women are so qualified in many ways. We are beyond needing to just champion women. Yes, we do champion our rights and our entitlement. But I think we need more to put our perspectives forward as women as to how do we see the way the societies are organized. Have the city delivered its promise? Has our city in Singapore made it comfortable for all constituents? The young, the old, the disabled, the women and the men. Why is a city organized the way it is? Who are the planners? What are they planning for? In whose interest? So it is the pursuit of the woman's perspective on all issues that Shireen Foster program is interested in. It's not just to look at women's rights. We have taken that as foundational. We don't argue about it. It is the right thing to do to include women and in organizations, in the labor force, and boards, in politics, in courtroom, in boardrooms, etc. But more, we need to, as people of Singapore, hone our awareness on issues, is to re-ask, why is education system the way it is? Why are politics the way it is? Why is why are companies organized the way they are? So asking these questions is the start point of all COM, Conference on the Move. So we bring delegates, and some of you have been with us to various facilities. We went to Alexandra Hospital, we went to one-room flats in Bukit Ho Swee, we were in the IDA and we talked to IBM on technology and digitization. And today we are fortunate to be here to look at sustainable cities and through climate action measures that Shell could share with us. I'm grateful and thank you again. And for the rest, I hope that for those who have absolutely no notion on climate action, on energy, that today will be the start of an awareness journey about energy and climate action. Thank you. May I now welcome Sita.
Thank you very much, Claire, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us here in Shell. We've moved here for 4 years now. Our office used to be in Clemenceau. Well, this is one part of the world that is starting to grow and develop, where you have buildings all ending with polis, and you have Mediapolis, Fusionpolis, Biopolis, and this is Metropolis. And we hope for these to be a center of innovation. So before I start, I wanted to get sort of a sense in the room. So how many of you have heard of Shell? See, that's an easy question, right? Who's heard of Shell? So the next question is, how many years do you think we've been in Singapore? Yeah, just shout out whatever number that's in your head. 80? 130? 130? More than 100? Okay, you're very close. We've been here 127 years. May I have the next slide, please? So we've been in Shell 127 years. We started 1891. And we started with a little place in Bukom, where we have oil installation. We always say that we started the oil and gas industry here in Singapore with that very first oil installation in 1891 in Bukom. And since then, there's been a series of development in Singapore. So I'm showing you this part of the milestone. In 1961, it's when Pulau Bukom refinery was built. And that was the first refinery of its kind in the region. And we then, in the 1990s, we built the petrochemical complex. And from the petrochemical complex, there have been a series of development as well. And with all of that, it positions us here just to get a sense of the presence that we have in Singapore. The Bukom refinery and the Jurong Island petrochemical complex is the largest wholly owned complex for Shell in the world. We also have a lubricants oil blending plant. It's the third largest in the world in Singapore as well. We, in February of 2016, Shell and BG combined. And in Singapore, we have the largest trading desk, LNG trading desk in the world here in Singapore. So I'm saying all this not to show off, but to really stress a point that while Singapore is a really small country, in terms of the consumption domestically, it's quite small. Shell's presence in Singapore and Singapore to Shell, it's a very significant one. Last year, we delivered about 90 billion worth of revenue, and this is in US dollars. So Singapore punches above its weight. It creates that environment where Shell can do business not just in Singapore, but also outside of Singapore. We consider ourselves one of the largest investor here in Singapore. Over the past couple of decades, we've invested about 13.5 billion here in Singapore. 3,100 FTEs. We have just under 40 different nationalities here in Singapore. And we do celebrate the major festivals, New Year, all the New Years, the Gregorian calendar, the Chinese New Year, Deepavali or Diwali, and Hari Raya. And one thing I would say is about 30% of the group's revenue is generated here in Singapore. So let's all feel very proud of the country and its relevance to Shell. The next slide, please. In terms of our geographical presence, we have, I just want to, you can't see the place physically, so let me just take you through where we are located. So we're here out into the southwest of the city, and okay, Metropolis, this is where our office is, and Pulau Bukom is our first installation, as I said, 127 years ago. Just a bit of a history here on Shell. We started, so the name Shell, so who knows the name Shell, how it came about, or how it came about? Shell was started by this individual called Samuel Marcus. And Samuel Marcus was a trader of exotic items. And out in Borneo Islands during those days, they'll collect exotic shells and they get traded to Europe. And when the shells gets traded to Europe, they all come to Singapore. And that was the reason why that oil installation here in Bukom makes a lot of sense, because the vessels collect shell, went from Borneo down to here, and it get then moved to Europe. And Samuel Marcus then started exploring with vessels, the different types of vessels to bring all these exotic items. In fact, if you go to the Lee Kong Chian Museum of Natural History, you would see some exotic birds as well that was traded by Samuel Marcus and his business. In 1907, so you see now Shell has, our name is Royal Dutch Shell. Now the Dutch Petroleum actually started, Royal Dutch Petroleum started in Batavia, in the Java Islands here. So the Shell's history dates back a long time, and it's mostly in this part of the world. So in 1907, Royal Dutch Petroleum and Shell merged to become Royal Dutch Shell. And it was our biggest acquisition combination ever, and then BG was our next one. So that's the history. You can see two very so the Royal Dutch Petroleum provides the fuel, and Shell has the goods and the vessel, and that's how the two companies merged, and that's where we got to today. Other parts, we have oil terminal here in Pandan. Of course, as I said, Jurong Island is a petrochemical complex. The Tuas lubricants plant here. And by the way, this is going to be where PSA will move as well. It will be the Tuas megaport. When completed, will be the largest facility in the world for Singapore. The Seletar Airport, so this is where all the private jets and private planes fly in. So Seletar Airport, we operate it, it's operated by Shell. And in here, CAFI, this is the joint venture that is set up to fuel all the planes that comes into Changi Airport. So this is our presence here. So where as I said earlier on, Singapore is an important hub for us. Every downstream business, it's a backbone for our downstream business. So the way you look at our business is upstream. So anything from the ground up, the exploration, the production, up to the production of the crude or the gas, that's called upstream. And then the downstream part is when you take the crude, you refine it. So what we have here in Singapore as we refine the crude, that's the downstream part of the business. Where we take the crude, we convert it into products where we market it downstream. So all of the downstream business are represented here in Singapore, and some upstream businesses as well. Okay, the energy challenge. Has anyone here attended talks by Shell, other than the Shell people? Don't put your hands up. Anyone here has attended talks by Shell before?
This is the first one.
First one, huh? Yeah, because sometimes we engage with SMU students. Okay, so the energy challenge. Back in the late 90s, early 2000, in Shell we kept talking about three hard truths. And the three hard truths were: one, the world needs more energy; two, energy is getting harder and harder to find; and three, with all of these, there will be climate challenge as well. So with that, we started then doing a lot of work to see how can we understand these three hard truths and how can Shell respond. We call it the energy challenge. So we know that the world population is increasing. In fact, you know, the previous numbers that we've seen was that the world population will increase to 9 billion, and now it's 10 billion by the year 2050. And one interesting fact with this is 67%, if you imagine that, 67%, nearly 3 in 4 will be living in cities. And that creates challenges in urban areas as well. And I'll talk about that later. Today, there is a rising demand for energy. And one of the facts that we keep talking about and we're finding ways to access is to address is about 2 billion of the world population does not have access to energy. We've established a group called Energy Access, and we want that group to look at how do we provide affordable energy to those who do not have access to it. It's a problem that we like to solve, but it's a difficult one. An ongoing supply, as we look at the need for energy and climate challenges, we looked at renewables, and we expect renewable to triple by the year 2050. So just to get a sense, what percentage of renewables do you think is used around the world? Just give me a number. 5, 10. Yeah, it's a very low percentage of the whole energy system. It is probably about it's under 10% today. In fact, it's closer to the 5% today. So I want to talk about the Shell scenario. We do scenarios. So Shell started scenarios in the 70s. It's been about 40 years already of scenarios. So what scenarios do is we look decades ahead. It's not, a lot of times people looked at scenarios and thought that it's our way of predicting the future. Scenarios is not a way of predicting the future. Scenario is a tool that we use to really test all plausible outcomes. And it's for us to look at what could potential events look like and how might we respond. It's used as a tool, a strategy tool, for us to then define how we would respond. As I said earlier on, from a scenarios perspective, we know that population is increasing. We know that there will be more demand for energy. We know that energy will get harder and harder to access. And with that then comes climate challenges as well. So when we looked at the scenarios, we developed the last set of scenarios that we developed was in 2015. And in there, what we looked at was two scenarios. One is called mountain and the other one's called ocean. So mountain is, you imagine a mountain, right? And you sit right at the top and you look down. So mountain is about strong leadership. It's about the rich getting richer, actually the powerful getting more powerful. So we're talking about nations, not individual. And in that scenario, policies will be harder to get changed because you can imagine, right? Policies gets developed top down. There'll be a certain degree of inertia because the powerful, depending on the incentives, may or may not want to change certain policies. Ocean is the other way around. So with we have one of our chief strategist. He said that his 19-year-old son has never seen his left palm. And the reason why he's never seen his left palm is because he's always holding his phone in his hand. With technology and with digital access, the power then starts to shift to the consumers, to the users. And that's the ocean world. And with that world then, nations gets harder and harder to govern. And individuals then has quite a bit of a say because they have access, the information access is quite level. They have access to information, they are more vocal. And in that scenarios world, we then expect renewables to become a larger share. Whereas in the other world, we expect renewables to grow, but not as fast as ocean. And one of the driving factors for that, and you can see that in many countries, it's the population, and let me just sidetrack a little bit. In our work with cities, in one of the discussions that pops up a lot is about equality. So residents of cities want equality. They want equal access to education, they want equal access to job. Importantly, they want equal access to healthy living, clean air. And so when you look at these, the challenges, the energy challenge that we've talked about, right? So it's more energy, harder to access, climate change. There is a demand for cleaner air, and so we started the work to think about what would a net zero emission world look like. So net zero emission will take a time frame, and say a time frame in the future, how do we keep emissions at the same level? And who's heard of the Paris Agreement? So COP21, Paris Agreement, this is the one that is of all of the COP, so you can see COP, this is 21 already. Of all the COP, this is the one that is the most mentioned because there was a breakthrough with countries signing up to keep the change in climate to under 2 degrees. And we released another scenario just recently. In fact, my colleague Jeremy Bentham was here last week. And we released a scenario called Sky. And Jeremy was asked why sky. It's when you look, he said, when you look beyond oceans and mountains, what do you see? Sky. We thought it was blue sky. But anyway, we have this scenario called Sky. And what Sky is developing a set of pathways, and these are plausible pathways to 2070 for net zero emissions. And in that world, we then expect renewables to become a larger portion of the whole energy mix. I want to talk a little bit about energy mix. So just a sense, right? When we say energy, what's in your mind? So what does energy represent to you? What's energy to you?
Energy is potential energy, kinetic energy, that sort of stuff, a mix of stuff.
Yeah.
As a basic.
Okay. Others, energy. What does energy mean to you? You've heard of Copton, lights, electricity. Huh? Yeah. Energy,
Power.
Power.
To enable us to do things.
Yeah. One more. Energy, what does it mean to you?
Natural resources.
Yeah. Natural resources? Yeah. So, water is great, but we don't define water as energy.
You need energy to produce water.
That's right. Or water to produce energy also. Yeah, yeah. So we used to talk about the stress nexus, which is food, energy, and water. And in any cities, in order for you to live comfortably, you need to be able to address that stress nexus. But back to energy. So this lady here, when you say it's all natural resources, the way we define energy, so you can see in there, it's all sorts of energy source. It's gas, oil, coal, bioenergy, nuclear, solar, wind. Anything from, so crude is considered energy. Yeah? And we see energy being used in 4 areas. And this is how we simplify the pathways to net zero emissions. So we see energy being used in 4 areas. And these are in buildings, in industries, in transport, and in power. Today, actually, only about 20% of all of this energy mix goes to the production of power. In a world where we want to see net zero emission, more and more of these, so electrification is one means of decarbonization. So electrification is, for instance, our mode of transport, moving to electricity, buildings to be more and more efficient on electricity and the use of digital technology. So we envisage a world where about 50, more than half of the energy mix moving to electrification. That is that pathway that will allow us to get to net zero emissions. And Sky is a scenario that looks at net zero emission by the year 2070. It is possible. It's very difficult. It has to be with efficiency is one of the ways. Technology changes, and more importantly, that mix of power source. Okay. Our purpose, Shell's purpose, powering progress together to provide more and cleaner energy solutions. And I want to break it down, and you know, it's a simple statement, but it has quite some significant meaning behind it. Powering progress together in Shell, what we believe in is the problem is big and complex. And in trying to develop solutions, we can't do it alone. So you can see in Shell what we're doing more and more, and we also want to encourage other corporations to do the same. It's to bring together parties who are like-minded, to convene those who have the same desires and goals to look at how do we solve the problem of providing more and cleaner energy solutions. There's something, you know, when you think of Shell, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? Petrol station, yeah. Bukong, maybe in Singapore, that's the next one, huh? But do you know what we produce in Jurong Island? Petrochemical products. And what are petrochemical products? From head to toe, lubricants, surfactant, yeah, for shampoos, for soap. In fact, makeup, yeah, that phone, the plastics, the bed you sleep in, the foam, the cars, you know, the dashboard, the chair. So the world, if you go around and if you have interest in petrochemical products, you see that there are many companies, oil and gas companies, they're building petrochemical complexes. And we expect over the next decade for petrochemical products to double in demand. So when we say energy solutions here, we think Shell has a role to play in developing products, and these are petrochemical products, that delivers efficiency. So lighter products for cars, so that it uses less power, lighter products for transport system, plastics that are sustainable, and also really equipping modern development as well. There's actually one thing I wanted to say as well. When we developed Sky, one of the things we looked at is, in order to enable human development, what is the level of energy that each individual will need? So the absolute minimum of energy required by each individual for human development and progress. It's about 150 gigajoules per year. And today, in the US, it's about double that. Any idea in Singapore how much we use? It's about 250 per individual. So we're a very modern society, we use a lot of energy. So the whole idea of, to address this climate challenge, one big idea is efficiency, is how do we get it down to the basic of about 150 gigajoule per individual in order to enable net zero emissions by the year 2017. So how do we develop sustainable city? A year and a half ago, Shell took the decision to establish a city solutions group to look at energy solutions for cities. And why are we doing it? This is, over the last decade, the fastest growth, and out into the future, the fastest growth, one of the fastest growth that we're seeing is in urbanization. I was in the Mayor's Forum just last week, and urbanization, and constantly, every year when I attend, listening to what the mayors are saying, urbanization is one of their biggest challenges. So these are populations all congregating into the city because they want to live in city. And how do you ensure that? Remember I said earlier on that residents want equality, so they want equal access to infrastructure, to build, to clean air, to education. How do you make sure that you provide that in a city that just grows and grows in population? So this statement here says that every 3 out of 4 individuals will be living in a city by 2050. And at this rate, about 1.4 million people's city will be built every week. This is what it means literally. And actually, the other one is also land use. Larger percentage, so you can see cities creeping out. Of course, in Singapore, we're limited because we're an island. But if you look elsewhere, you see cities spreading out because more and more people just want to be in cities. And it's our belief that a well-designed city will make it very, very livable, and it will ensure that there is prosperity for people who lives in the city. And in fact, there was a piece of paper that was done that says that because of this fast urbanization, about 70 trillion worth of investments needs to be made in order to make these cities livable for people who are moving in. And cities that are not well developed, and you can see, right, cities that are not well planned, you get congestions, you don't have enough access to schooling, education, for instance, or even healthcare facilities. So it's our belief that in order for us to plan cities well, we need to do it in an integrated fashion, and by that we mean you need to consider all of the city systems. And in Shell, when we looked at cities, we can put them into 5 big categories in terms of what they need, what their needs are. Energy is one, environment, and this is things like what do you do with waste, for instance, pollution, living, and living is about healthcare and schooling, urban planning, and mobility. Mobility is becoming a very big issue now, and this is how people move about in cities. So we need to think about, as you develop infrastructure for cities, you need to think about how all of these fit together. In fact, what we're advocating is before when you design a building, not after you've built it, but when you're designing it, to take into consideration all of these needs. How would mobility be served? What would the energy sources be like? How do you cool a building? How do you heat the building? How do you maintain it on an ongoing basis? What are the materials that you will use in order for it to be energy efficient? We're trying to advocate that these are done up front, and you can see groups like BCAs who's now set up standards for how you build buildings. The other one is it has to be collaborative, and you have to bring together different parties. And as we work the breakout afterwards. That's how we want you to think about how do you approach cities in a collaborative manner. And by that we mean bringing together parties, mayors, city officials, private, and very importantly, the residents, the community. We found that cities that are sustainable are the cities where the community is very involved in the development of the cities. And then the third one is compact. I know it sounds scary to think about living in a smaller and smaller space, But the idea is, in order for us to address the population growth, cities has to be compact. So common space, larger common space, smaller private space, and this is how we can get to a world where energy efficiency is top of the criteria. So we thought it would be interesting to ask the questions on what can women do to make a difference, and we will do that in the breakout. And what we want to do now is to share with you a video that we have developed. And we thought, you know, being an energy company, that we should say something about the work that we're doing in closing the gender gap for women in the field of engineering. A quarter of the women go through STEM education, and by the time they get to senior management, only 14% of the women are left at that level in engineering field. So the world, we worked with World Bank, sorry. I was going to say World Health Organization, but that sounded wrong. So World Bank facilitated a group of companies and signed an agreement for companies such as ours to put in effort to close the gender gap, and this is our effort to close the gender gap in engineering. And we are going to show a video. Why don't we show the video now?
Those clothes don't make you look good. Are you putting on weight or something? She only got the position because she's a woman. You don't want to be an engineer. That's a man's job. These are real things women engineers have actually heard.
Why doesn't your husband just let you stay home? Hey, sweetie, when you got a minute, I'll get out a cup of coffee.
Look who's wearing earrings today. You got promoted too?
So we've only got one ladies' bathroom. It's up 3 flights of stairs.
Nice breath, Sarah. Good to see you making an effort.
File that for me. That's good girl.
Oh, great. I'm so glad there's another woman here.
We won't tiptoe around you because you're a woman, you know. You still have to put in the same amount of work.
So I guess you'll be starting a family soon, huh?
Hey, guys, no swearing. There's a woman in the
I
room.
don't think this university is ready for a female
Are
president.
you sure you'll be able to handle this course? It's quite advanced.
We'll do the more technical stuff, and you can take notes, okay?
This work is very strong. Have you thought about applying for the Chancellor's Fellowship too?
You're so good at math and science, you have to apply to these top universities.
Have you thought about a career in engineering?
I'll help you research, and we'll put together a poster for the science
Who's my
section.
clever girl?
Did you build that all by yourself?
That's amazing. I'm so proud of you.
Be the difference. Close the gender gap. Let's make the future.
And what would you say if you heard someone saying these things?
I would say, why would you say something like that? I can do whatever you can do, and even if you do think that, we women will show you that we can do it. Comment below what you would say.
So that's a video we released at the start of this year to really bring out the conversations. It's a starter piece, and you know, some of the comments that was made, they are all real comments, and I personally have people coming to me saying, you know, some of those things, not to me personally, but women coming to me to ask for advice. Okay, we are now about to go on to a break. Sorry, you want to say something? I'll just quickly introduce what we're going to do after the break. So we'll have a breakout. Ziwei over there, who heads up our internal communications, she will take us through the details afterwards. But what we want to do is to break you up into groups, and each group will represent a city. And in line with the way we think about scenario planning and the future, what we want to do is for you to look out into the future and imagine what a city could be like, what can we do, and have that dialogue. We believe that the ideas starts first with the conversation, and so we want to hear your views.
Let me first thank you, Swee Chen, for a very insightful introduction. And I think this, for many, is the first time to listen to energy. And I really look forward to 2070, the sky scenario. That was really impressive. I think it was launched only recently, right? The concept. Yeah. And I hope a lot of other companies like yours in this sector will follow suit. There was a discussion that when we all look at climate action responsibilities, whose bigger responsibility it is. If we go by sector approach, oil and gas companies will probably have to take the bigger responsibility. Let's say, for example, tourism in Bayantry, our impact on emissions is really about less than 5%. So whatever we do, whatever we can improve on efficiency or alternative sources, only it does not move the needle. So it is very good leadership by Shell to really move this needle by leading the light as how you can do it with Sky. And I also like the idea of bringing this whole climate challenge to ordinary lives like ours, whether it be the way we live, the way we drive, and what we're going to invent. And now to also push women towards STEM, science, technology, engineering and maths. There were issues where there were men who are graduated from engineering faculty, and there are a lot of them. They don't end up in being engineers. The last 10 years, do you know where they were? In banking. Or in any other sectors. In a way, yes, you can apply the engineering discipline onto a different sectors, and that's useful. But the world is really lacking in engineers for infrastructural development, for innovating alternative energy. And women, die hard, want to be engineer, had all these barriers that Swee Chen talked about. So it is very good that we are looking and addressing this issue. And for those who are young mothers, when your daughters come to you to say they want to do engineering, encourage it. And this is one issue that has been highlighted in the recent conversations, that the world needs this discipline badly. If not, we'll have a lot more breakdown in SMRT. Questions?
Actually, while you're thinking about, I'm sorry, if you don't mind, I just say one thing about why STEM education is so important. Our group chairman, Chad Holliday, wrote a piece of article, and what he said is, if we don't have enough of our people in STEM education, can you imagine? It was STEM education that developed the immunization for many of the major diseases that we have seen. It was STEM education that develops, all of these modern technology that many of us are so used to. So it's absolutely important that now and the future we have ourselves, our children, all, not all, sorry, but a portion of them interested in STEM and in the field of technology and innovation.
My name is Lily, and I happen to work in the energy sector. This video that you show is very emotional. I think it really resonates, with us. And also being a mother, with a daughter, I can really see, that yeah, you know, you can say that the sky's the limit, but at the same time, you know, it's very terrifying for girls who want to venture in this area. And comments, you know, that you get that, you know, can you really do it? You know, it's a tough business. And, you know, as women go to, you know, have children and family, you know, there's a lot of challenges coming to, you know, getting a seat in the boardroom. So I think the question is that the future belongs to the next generation. You know, and the generations of the future Singapore. Just wondering, you know, what is Shell doing in terms of engaging the youth? You know, the topic of urbanization, you know, is so, you know, not just Singapore but a global problem. How are our youth being engaged? And I think a lot of SMU representation here as well. I think we'll be interested to hear from you.
It's a very good question, and it's a personal commitment of mine. I believe in looking into the future, we need to involve our youth. Our youth needs to be more engaged in determining what the future will look like. And I'll just tell you a story. In March this year, for the second year in Singapore, we had the event called Make the Future. And as part of Make the Future, we ran, in the front end, we ran a scenarios competition. And this year we decided to run the competition beyond Singapore. Last year we ran it just in Singapore. This year we decided to run it beyond Singapore. And we involved Thailand, Egypt, and Singapore. And as we were engaging with this, these are usually university level students, and as we are engaging with them, so we gave them the idea, we gave them the topic of energy in Asia, the year 2050, and they come up with scenarios and what it would look like. And as they were talking, I was talking to one of them about gig economy. And, you know, my generation, we're all talking about gig economy, and he said, what's that? It's so passé, you know? We don't think about gig economy anymore. And what that strikes me is, in scenario planning, today, when we do scenario planning, you know, it's typically the grey haired, tons of experience behind us. But when we're looking out into the future, it involves the young. So one of the things that we said is, you know, when we do scenario planning, we need to involve the young, because it's going to be the world that they'll be living in, right? I mean, 50 years from now, I won't be here unless there are fantastic scientific innovation. You know, I want to live gracefully and have the next generation come on, and they have to be involved in that dialogue. And to that extent, what we want to do is to continue that scenarios planning competition. We think it's a fantastic way to involve kids and to get their views and their thoughts on what the future may be. And we are doing several things as well. So in the Shell, the Singapore International Energy Week, we would typically have a youth segment. In fact, we wanted a youth segment, so CU now has a youth segment where we will engage the young about energy challenges. And it's not just about challenges, they create opportunities as well.
The next COM is going to be with Michael Cole on Sustainable Cities, who's from the Sustainable Cities unit. So he will probably give you some of the answers, what Singapore is doing, what agencies are doing to encourage youth and Singaporeans to learn of all these measures. But Asia Stewardship, which is a Temasek funded program, had actually a youth league to address some of these climate action changes too. And now a lot of universities, and interestingly, the one that I'm interested in is in China, in Tsinghua Daxue, where they have a joint degree, and this is maybe something Shell can consider looking at sponsoring Singaporeans to go and do this. It's a joint degree, one on public policy and business ethics. The other one is a joint degree with the University of Geneva on sustainability. and city development. And it is done in English in Tsinghua. And I forwarded this information to Temasek to hope that there should be more of Singaporean students, graduates to take this on as a master's degree, you know. And some of our BES students in NUS, BES is a Bachelor of Environmental Sciences. We are very young, we are just about like 4 or 5 years old. So that cohort of scientists, girls and boys, who are steeped into this agenda, it's yet to mature. But the graduates from the BES program in NUS could very well be funded to China or to Geneva or to Berkeley for this course. And I think it is going to be an upcoming trend for those who are not strictly interested in engineering, but interested in sustainable solutions which involve some level of engineering and chemistry, etc. So I see an emerging discipline that's come up, and I think Singapore government will be very much more involved and I think in future Shell and many other agencies will also look into funding young people on those courses.
It's a very good point, this one. So when I talked about the big numbers in here in Singapore, 90% of what we do it's done outside of Singapore. We do it in Singapore but outside of Singapore. So this one about sending our students out to learn from outside of Singapore is exceedingly important. For Singapore to continue on the path that we are in, our Singaporeans needs to learn how to play and succeed in the backyard of others. If we can only succeed in Singapore, we would be much, much smaller. We have to learn how to play and succeed in others' backyard as well.
Unfortunately, the barrier is that this degree is 2.5 years. So a lot of our graduates say, huh, after 3 years, 4 years, another 2.5 years, damn long. So that is one thing we have to find a solution for, whether we can ask you how to design the program that is short-term but focused.
Thank you very much, Raymond Kokia. Okay, I know it's been quite well. Thanks very much for the presentation, it's fantastic. Just a quick one, just follow up from Lily, is that I'm a mentor to ASEAN Youth Organization, which is going to be quite interesting because ASEAN is taking passing the chairmanship to the next one, and there will be a big event in November. So the element of them is that they don't have the ladies as chairperson. So maybe we can talk a little bit to get the ladies on board, because the 3 chairmen is all men. So I got 2 questions.
Surprise?
Not surprised. I'm not surprised, but I want to make a difference, so that's why I'm saying. I think I got 2 questions actually. The first one is that I saw your chart regarding how the energy is been shifting to solar as well as to other non-oil-based energy producing material. How would Shell address this? Because this is important. Shell is still essentially an oil-based refinery producer. So how are you going to address this when you move forward? Would you be investing in those? One of the things about electric car is not pervasive is because of our infrastructure. We actually don't have a lot of places where we can basically plug and electrify. The second one is more interesting because the World City Summit is once every 2 years. I was there. I have a new technology. I retired 10 years ago. So now it's just people coming to me to sort of bring their new startup coming up. Waste to energy. New gasification technology is able to produce from waste to energy in green plastic, burning it non-pollution. So this is cool. A lot of new technology is coming on stream, and I think that may be another focus that Sherry Foster program might want to tie up with World City Summit to make your program really onto the world stage, because by then there will be a lot of mayors coming in, what you say, and they will be interested to see how clear, in this program we're able to get the other gender onto the big platform. I think there's a thought. We can work on it. I know Ting Chai quite well, I'm sure you know as well. So I think he's the one who organized it, and he approached me and talked about new initiative. Thanks.
It's a good question. You know, when we talk about scenarios where we're looking at 40 plus or even longer of energy data and then looking forward 40, 50 years. So we are now predominantly gas. When we looked out into the scenarios and looked at the energy requirement and all those things, in the 90s we took a decision, late 90s, we took a decision to invest in more gas assets. Our business, we have to always take a long view, because you know it's like when we talked to Olam, we said that there are a lot of similarities between our business and their business, except you know when they plant a seed to the time you get to harvest, it takes a long time. And for oil and gas, it's the same thing as well. From the time you discover whatever is underground, whether it's oil or it's gas, it takes multi-years before you can produce the crude or the gas. So in the 90s, we started investments in gas assets. Today, more than half of our assets, and also with the PG combination, it's now gas-based. And we've also, about 2 years ago, we set up a new energy business. Actually, sometimes I think in Shell, we are always ahead of our time. We invested in biofuel, in solar, in hydrogen, more than 2 decades ago. And at that stage, you know, the world simply isn't ready to have the discussion on climate change, nor is it ready to have a discussion on renewables. But it is more ready now. And what we have done is we've identified 10 countries around the world where we believe energy transition is very important. Of course, it's very important to all of the world, but these are the 10 where we can really dive deep into looking at what would the energy mix look like and how can Shell respond. And Singapore is one of those 10 countries. That's the first one. The second one is 2 years ago, we established a new energy business. And this new energy business it's looking at how do we create power value for Shell. And by that I mean how can we develop a power business. And so in the new energy business on new fuels, our focus is on hydrogen and biofuels. Renewables, our focus is on solar and wind. And we are also establishing a digital ventures business where we look at how do we tie all of these together and how can digital technology help in the providing energy access. So you'll see that, again, looking very far out into the future, oil and gas still continues to be predominant. There are still some things that cannot be replaced by solar or wind. So for instance, large manufacturing facilities, so like in Bukom. In Bukom, we use a lot of power. We use about 150 megawatts of power. And a large percentage of those, I think only a small 5% can be replaced with solar. All of the rest needs really high energy fuel that renewable energy cannot, they're not suitable. So oil and gas will always continue to have a role to play. Transport like airplanes, jet fuel, we're looking into biojet fuel, increasing the mix. Yeah, but you still need oil and gas. You know, I talked about petrochemicals, so you know you know, shampoo and you know, everything that we use, even the clothes we wear, they're all petrochemical products. So it's our belief that going forward, petrochemical products, oil and gas still plays a significant role, but that mix in energy energy going towards power will increase. And so we are now developing a power value pool.
There is an anti-plastic movement going on this year. So is Shell doing something about that?
So we don't produce single-use plastics. Our research goes into looking at lighter materials and how do we make plastics. So one thing that I would say is we make components for plastic. We don't make the plastics itself. So it's working with these companies to see how do we devise components that are more sustainable, components that are lighter.
So on a personal level, from today onwards, stop using plastic bags. Number one. And we have, in the hotel business, we have stopped giving you bottles. We have adopted in Banyan Tree an anti-plastic campaign, and this comes from young people, like my daughter. So now you go to a conference rooms in Banyan Tree, you only have jars of good water with lemon. But there are always the group that says, how come no bottles? I pay so much, you don't give me a bottle? And I have to share. I have detractors. So we have to start our education as to why we are doing anti-plastic. And now we're looking at producing straws, not from plastic, but from starch. Biodegradable material. So I think there are bits of efforts that everyone in our daily consumption that we can start thinking of from plastic. So no more plastics.
Which gets me to the waste to energy conundrum. So
I can share with you what it is. It's cool. It's new. It's American and Italian joint.
Oh, is it?
It's a ceramic where you take away the oxygen at the combustion area.
Yeah. Cool, yeah. We also have waste to energy. In fact, we've set up a pilot plant in India to test the technology. It's in pilot. So there's a lot of technology that converts waste. Okay, great, yeah. But I always have an issue about, and this is more personal than anything, right? I'd rather throw less.
Would you say that all this technology and Raymond are talking about, you're talking about, these are actually could only be undertaken by big companies with resources? No. Good to hear.
Yeah, I think that's why, you know, we always say, I talked about powering progress together. You've got to bring the companies big and small. In fact, so we started this Shell Idea Refinery, and this is one where we provide mentorship. And we also provide where we can access, because these startups, more often than not, they need the advice, they need somewhere to test their products. And a lot of times what we found is startups where they fail is you know, that inflection point where you go from a startup to be able to scale production. That's always that phase where they need more help, and it's not just money alone. It's advice on how you scale up, it's access to expertise, access to use cases, access to businesses that are willing to test their products. And that's why big and small, we all need to work together.
Are there a lot more of women entrepreneurs who are in all these startups in this area of work, would you say?
There are a lot. It's just, I feel what you mentioned about the stand, it's a matter of trying to market it to the women. That actually an engineer career, you can switch to other things later in life. But if you focus in others like lawyers and all that, you can't go back to engineers. Very difficult. I'm a mathematician, I'm in finance. But
no, I'm just saying in the current state, whether there are a lot more women entrepreneurs who are interested but could not get that sponsorship. nor some credit to help them scale a little bit or to experiment. I was just wondering whether there are more of women in visionaries, because they're more connected in a way to life needs, and they always wanted more of something, but not on the scale of a plant, but on daily application. So they would come up with ideas and design, but many may have started up but couldn't carry on. I don't know whether there's such a vibrant sector, and if there is, it is good to highlight them and then to lead, to get some sponsorship for them. Yeah. Do you know? Anyone knows? Well, that is one information gap that we need.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Goh Swee Chen and Ms. Claire Chang. So ladies and gentlemen, let us now take 15 minutes break before we come back for the breakout session. We gave you a little bit of information on this city, just a bare minimum. You can use your phones and Google more about this city, and also, of course, we probably have traveled to these cities and also experienced how the city is like. Each of these cities is very unique and different from each other, yeah? So, I need your help in each of your group. Each of you represent one, pick up one of these persona. So maybe Nate here, you can choose, you either be a university student, a local SME business owner, a mid-level employee MNC, a female mayor of your city, or a parent, be it a father or mother who drives to work daily. You must pick one persona. Imagine yourself as that person, living in that city, and then you bring to your team and discuss what are some of the opportunities and some of the challenges that you will face in this city. Okay? And suggest some of the ways that we could leverage these opportunities, things that we can do very well in this city, things that we can address some of the challenges. We think of it for what the cities are facing now, and try to imagine it. Maybe you put your scenario lenses and imagine the future. What would it be in 2050 for Bangkok, for Singapore, for Perth? It's just for fun. Imagine how it be and be creative. And come together as a group. We will spend 20 minutes thinking through, okay? And then after that, you will present and your group's thoughts on a consolidated basis on what your group has thought of, opportunities and challenges of this city now and in the future in 2050. Okay?
So we wanted you to think about, put yourself in the year 2050. There's one thing I want to say. The Lee Kuan Yew Center for Innovative City did a series of research. One of the research was done by Professor Sharon Siddiqui, and this looks at generations. What would that look like? So you imagine by the year 2040, because of the life expectancy has increased, by the year 2040 you have 6 generations living under one group. Under one household. So if you imagine yourself in whatever role that may be, imagine a world where, because of extended life expectancy, you would have 6 generations of, yeah. Okay, so I wanted to just leave you with that thought as we project ourselves into the future.
everyone. I'm Gail, and I'm a coach and an investor in women's businesses. So we have Perth, and we started just by looking at some key benchmarks compared to Singapore, which is our common reference point. So by comparison, Perth is less dense, a lot less dense. So we're talking about 6 times, 1/6 of the density in Singapore. Their population is about 1/4 of ours. Their fertility is higher, 2 versus 1.1. So there's lots of capacity for growth in terms of space and population support. Energy-wise, we weren't quite able to get the up-to-date statistics, so we question if it really is that Singapore uses less energy per capita than Perth. We found that questionable. So looking forward, we discovered that Perth has a huge investment in alternative energy. They have a target of having solar panels in every home by 2050, which I think would really galvanize the mix of energy sources there. They have a goal also by 2030 to reduce emissions by 28%. So there's a real development in renewable sources and alternative sources. As with any Australian city, there's always water concerns. I think that would be something that would be pressing on everyone's mind all around the world, but especially in a dry country like Australia. We felt that land optimization would be a continual focus. Right now, there are lots of pockets of living areas with a lot of green in between. The public transport is not like Singapore, and cars are a big method of mobility. So how would we shift that so that people can still get around, get on with their lives, drop their kids off, get to work, but in a sustainable way. So infrastructure development, including transport, would be one thing, and also cities. How would we plan a city so that they can continue to develop in their different suburbs and still stay connected? One of the challenges that may be more and more important are weather fluctuations. As I mentioned earlier, dry weather, but maybe other factors that our climate change might bring about. So that's a question mark for this sort of futuristic planning. Lastly, what is the opportunity of Perth? I'm not sure how many of you have been there, but it's often thought of as the retirement city in Australia. And it is quiet, a quiet life. Things shut down in the evenings, and it's quite family-based. So I found myself asking, well, what is the future? Who would live there in 2050? Who would want to live there? But perhaps there is a whole other paradigm of living and working that maybe as Singaporeans we can't foresee, right? For us, working is till 7 o'clock, and then it's a real back-to-back intense speed. But in Perth, maybe it will attract people who want to live and work sustainably, and not just by consumption terms, but in terms of the pace of life and the quality of the relationships. So maybe that is how Perth may market itself in the future as a livable, sort of not competing with the intense metropolis around the world. Claire raised the idea of sustainability intelligence. So perhaps that may incorporate not just environmental aspects and educating the population with their awareness around their consumption methods, but what I mentioned a bit earlier about overall life approach. Anything else you guys want to add?
Speaking as the mayor of Perth, I therefore open up my city to any applications to my city at $100,000, which will be go to setting up a fund on sustainability. So welcome.
Hi,
I'm Michelle. I'm a lecturer with LaSalle and I teach arts management. So we have Raymond in our group who provided all the solutions before we had the challenges. So this is what Raymond recommended for 2050. There would be driverless cars. So these are auto vehicles. Therefore, pollution would actually not be a problem at all, although pollution is actually one of our challenges later. He can transform waste to become energy, so there's no pollution at all. And he also has a technology that can absorb carbon, and that's using paint. Would you like to
photosynthesis. There's a type of paint you paint on the wall, and then when the light shines on it, it will absorb carbon. Check on it.
Yeah. So that's our solutions. For challenges, we would like the city to be redesigned. So we imagine the city to be overpopulated, so there's E1, E1, San, all the different rings. How to get into the city at the quickest and with the least polluted, so that your when you go to Beijing, your skin gets so pollution, right? So the city to be redesigned and to have actually smaller communities that are smart and sustainable in itself. So imagining a Fusionopolis that is enlarged in the context of Beijing. So that's so we imagined also for the different personas, a mid-level employee, he would actually be a sandwich class, meaning there will be a lot of people who are stuck in this class. And is it possible then to actually hold two jobs? Or will the society be open to people having two jobs in order to sustain themselves? For the SMEs, we would like Beijing to be a tech enabler city. And Raymond also has a one-ring solution, one of the rings.
I don't know whether you heard about it. It's just a ring that can do everything. Go MRT, got your database, got switch on your, come into the office. Cool.
Brilliant. So as a university student, we would like no pollution when we're walking to school. And also there were thoughts of having no more exams as a university student. But then there's an argument that, we actually want a campus so that we can have some social interactions. So the campus has now become a place for huddling and like what we're doing now, and for building networks, in addition to learning. But learning can be done so easily via Google. So the school becomes more of a social place. For the parents, traffic jams. Poor thing, the parent. Do I have enough time for my children? And if I'm stuck in the traffic jam, then the quality time that I have is actually in the car. How do I have enough time for my children, and also in thinking about the pollution, whether my children will then develop more allergies? So that sums up the challenges that we are facing. Thank you.
Thank you to Beijing. Alright, hey everyone, so we are Bangkok, and I'm the mayor, the female, speaking of becoming a female as a female mayor, but my panel over here will all have their own voices. So very quickly, I think Bangkok, we on the slide of Bangkok, but I think most people here probably have been to Bangkok. You kind of know what the picture is like. The cultural ties, generally they're very polite, they avoid confrontation. They are just developing their mass transit. We heard that they went from Sky to MRT, which is a new thing, and it's cheaper, right? Yeah, which is good. Yeah, slightly cheaper. They are fluent mostly in English and of course Thai. And their culture is also that it's time elastic for now, but we don't know 30 years from now whether they will change. So the challenges that our group highlighted, and this is where I hope the group can also add on if I have missed anything. There's really a lot of traffic in Bangkok, as you've all experienced before. There's a very strong chauffeur kind of culture. Everyone is a driver of some sort. But right now the infrastructure is not very well planned, both roads-wise as well as the mass transit, because unlike us where we have SMRT, they have different ownership.
Yes. It's different owner for the SkyTrain and the MRT, and the MRT line stops is quite limited for now, so they are working on expanding along the line for accessibility.
That's right. And also there's very minimal penalty for driving. For example, to go to the industrial areas, there are tolls, but it's a very token sum, 50 baht. Yeah. There's also the phenomenon of expanding boundaries, where a lot of the people from the rural areas are all trying to crowd into Bangkok, and this will of course lead to congestion, flooding, littering, and so on and so forth. And of course, one interesting trivia that you highlighted was that Thailand is actually the kitchen of the world, but a lot of them, they cook using charcoal cooking, which adds to pollution, and of course it's not energy efficient, and so on and so forth. So maybe I can get my team to speak a little bit more about the water taxis, because we drew a lot of parallels within a place that she lived before.
Okay. So my name is Sharon. I used to stay in the Netherlands, which also has a lot of water in their network. So I was just thinking of how we can have a water taxi and also flexi bridges, where the bridge actually, when the ship comes, the bridge actually opens up and then the water, the ships can flow, and when the bridge comes down, it's your normal road network. And also cycling, we imagine this is 2050, so we came up with the concept for amphibious vehicle. I mean, already your bicycles, your water, Thailand live on water as well as on land so much. So why not your car or your bicycle be amphibious so that you can go on water and land? And in terms of improved infrastructures, yeah, I can let you share more. Yeah.
Thanks, Sharon. I'm Jacinta, and basically right now, as we all know, with the poor infrastructure, the network planning needs to improve to move more out to the outer perimeters of Bangkok in terms of commercial buildings. Now most of the schools, popular schools, are also in the city center, and thus, during peak hours or even non-peak office hours, but peak school hours, everyone is flooding into the city center itself. So that can be definitely improved upon, as agreed by the female mayor. All right. Flood water, as you may have read or come across, as well as major issues still. So I think there are a lot of rivers in Bangkok. So we do need to work on drainage canals to properly, support the city when the next floods hit, because there's heavy monsoon season in Bangkok city itself. And I think several years ago, a lot of people lost their homes because the ground floor was all flooded out, and that wasn't covered by insurance, because it was defined as acts of God. So we need to have improved drainage canals, okay? And also there's an opportunity to develop more businesses and economies around the canals. I mean, right now we have hotels, famous hotels along the main Chao Phraya River. So continue to grow on that, identify the opportunities, and with proper drainage canals, you won't have a high threat of flooding in future going forward. And we take reference from the Amsterdam onion ring. I'll just let Sharon elaborate a bit on that. Yeah, very well planned.
So the idea is that in Amsterdam they have a central city, and then they actually diverged out, and they have the canals to actually flow through the roads. So the canals are also your transportation as well as your roads that actually coexist and interconnect together. Yeah.
Thank you. And together with Kim and Susan as well, there were very interesting ideas of e-commerce, drone delivery, to send the food to you rather than use a human. Okay, and portable container homes and hotels, where I think there's already some talk of it and from a source in America. Yeah. Would you like to say something? Yeah. Thanks,
okay, thank you. In America, I understand that in fact it's our own local entrepreneur. He actually buy from China those container, and he actually emulate the Airbnb. So he told those private owners that to allow him to park the containers there, then they can actually act as Airbnb. They cannot modify the house structure as fixed, but the container can be moved away, so it's not against legally they are permitted. So this could be one area, and then this will cut down the congestion and things like that, so because they can move away from the city. Then we also think in terms of solar system, like since there are so many private owners, private housing, then they can also, just like in Singapore now, we are very popular with solar cells and so on, so they can install the solar system to cut down their energy usage.
Maybe just to add, from the perspective of a mid-level employee in an MNC, one of the challenges that foreigners face when we go to Thailand is that Thais normally don't give a definitive answer if they're not sure. And sometimes it's actually just a wrong answer, but they don't want to say no. So I think one of the aspects is cultural, is to also have the Thai people to be more open and direct, and if they're not so sure, just to let others know so that others will be able to ask other people.
Okay, and as the mayor, again, just to highlight a bit of the economic Principal, I think someone, sorry, I'm not sure which, highlighted that Thailand is also a very strong medical tourism hub. And this really has a lot of synergy with the portable container ideas, because when more and more of the world comes to Thailand to stay and do their medical treatments and so on, they can stay in all these kind of portable containers. And finally, there's a very strong agricultural, a lot of farming in Thailand, of course. This means that there is also a lot of potential for biomass energy. And this can be a hybrid system with solar and so on. I won't go into the technicals here, but you get that. Right? So that's it for Bangkok. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Team Bangkok. My name is Lily. And being the students, I've been arrowed to do this. Okay, so team, feel free to chip in. I see that we're most compliant that we have. Blanca has led us to sort of structure our presentation in this way. So we go by the different persona, and our topic is Singapore on the screen. And here, I think all of us feel free to chip in, because here is our homeland, and we're very familiar with this. And we are in a transition, and even though the city has got smart nations and sustainable city, and also participated in the ASEAN, sustainable city just most recently, you can see that we are also leading hubs for many things: shippings, commercial hubs, digital, and various that we're leading the pack, for Southeast Asia. So I think here, the city is also going through a lot of challenges. If I'm not wrong, and forgive me if I'm wrong, Lee Hsien Loong has actually announced Singapore population to scale, right? To double the size to 10 billion, am I right? 10 billion in X years, and today we're 5. So it's doubling that population. And as also we welcome, foreign talents that continue to relieve our workforce. So we're also coping with, because of overcrowding, there are like flood waters. There are a lot of public transport, woes that we're facing today. And just like this morning, I ordered a taxi. It's comfort and it never comes. So, we sort of have that problem in there, and social disparity. So I think as we look into the different personas, we look at the world today and also in 2015. For the students, those who have families and students and nieces and all that, you realize that, there's a lot of, the world has, moved on digitally. So they check buses and MRTs, on their smartphone, and they timed their departure according to what they see on their apps, SMRT and buses and all that. So tomorrow, how do we improve in such a way that, to sort of resolve the whole overcrowding issue, and also that transport, by then, which I think we already see some of that, and I think EDB does a fantastic work, with mobility, on-demand buses, and public transportation will become a reality, tomorrow. So I think that would relieve, students getting to school on time and, completing, also their social life and all that. Then, as we look at cost of living as well, transportation cost has been on the rise. How do we help them to cope on this system? Perhaps that when transportations are on demand, you can also time your usage of transportation according to maybe non-peak hours could be of a different charging system. That could be the possibility. And if you look at local SMEs, business owner here, there's a lot of relying on foreign labor. Do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, so I'm Emily, so I'm a local SME business owner. I took over the business from my parents recently. So we're in the construction industry, and we really have a lot of pressure for hiring foreign labor, partially because it's very difficult to find workers, Singaporeans that want to do manual work. So because a lot of the current population is very highly educated, so everybody wants to move up the social ladder, right? So how do we find the right kind of labor? How do we even imbue the right kind of mindset that this industry is not a sunset industry, is something that every society needs, somewhere to live, somewhere to stay. So how do we come up with a different mindset to to motivate people to get back into this industry, I think is quite important.
As well as aging population, I think, with a lot of wisdom around this room, how do we channel, that expertise that the aging population, can upskill themselves, perhaps, in looking and giving the young the ideas, and also Singapore, how do we, create such space of a balance living and working, at leisure together. Mid-level employees, I think nature of jobs, as we already said, I think Claire mentioned this, the gig economy is already here, and with sort of, work is changing, and in a lifetime we're going to have a couple of jobs and not just one or two. There are like multiple jobs, that the millennials are going to embrace in the future. How then do we think about issues of social mobility, right? So I think that was discussed. Cost of living, we touched that before, and the female mayor actually happened to be this gentleman. Yeah, so food security was raised. Do you want to talk about it? Okay, our female mayor is very shy. Water management, aging, and express transport. I thought that you raised a very interesting question about how today express transport it's not being fully optimized, right?
Recently, I saw the express services, like they 12, you got 12E, 147, but I noticed during the non-peak period, they are quite empty. It's a waste of taxpayers' money. But they should study the needs of the population and give this. But these e-services can help only when there's an MRT breakdown and all that, but also the peak service. But I feel that during other times, these buses should not be on the road.
Okay, I think in relation to that, moving to better urban planning, I think Singapore get overcrowded, which is pretty much related as the issue here. E-transport. Yeah, so
flooded.
That was the same point.
Oh, same point, yeah? Okay, water flooding, water issues, resolving that. Yeah, so I think also, the point of like the different modes of transportation, with mobility, they will be relying on, less of maybe fuel, more of electric cars, more of vehicles charging, car parks will be changing, that there will be shared, charging systems. I think some of these bikes and all that are already present here, but how do we make it, better, more sustainable, for Singapore living? The last part, parents who drive to work, today, the whole cost of, the rising cost of public transportations and COE prices never really did drop. So, in future, how do we look at better planning, infrastructure, and also changing mindset, of maybe there will be more car-free days, that with car-free days, how does public transport support, the whole mobility for Singapore? Anything to add, Tim?
Yeah, so I think to summarize, a lot of our points actually led to not a solution, but actually changing the mindset, which was in line with what Ms. Goh said about the ocean outlook. So it was each person understanding these differences and knowing that they have to play their part to actually create change.
Thank you. Thank you. So from Jakarta's perspective, the challenges that we have to face, traffic congestion, that always comes to mind when we think about Jakarta. There's flood management and waste management, and actually these are all business opportunities. Yeah. The first thing that we wanted to talk about was the traffic, and talking about how can we maximize the time spent in the commute. And one of the ideas that we had was to, for example, have teleconferencing cars. Like, there should be driverless cars even before we reach 2050. So we were thinking about these driverless cars having teleconferencing capabilities so that people can use the time wisely while being stuck in traffic. Also, we think that by 2050, traffic congestion would have eased because there would be a mass rapid transit and there would be decentralization. So for us, decentralization is a very important solution for Jakarta.
there should be urban redevelopment, and then using this urban redevelopment solution, we should have integrated living as a key solution. There should be buildings or whole developments that have integrated living planning. So this would include housing and also having other facilities, because we were thinking about 6 generations all living under one roof. So there should be childcare facilities, which means parents don't have to commute that far. There should be elder care facilities, healthcare facilities, all in one place using renewable energy, solar panels if possible. As the mayor, I would welcome all these developments to come in, and we would think about a way to make this kind of housing accessible for everybody, because there's also a significant poverty level in Jakarta. This would also deal with waste management and flood management, because we will deal with proper utility providers there. What else did we talk about? Yeah, and also for students, university students, we would have schools nearby. We would also have study facilities there as well. So we were thinking about how do we use data analytics as well to try and maximize efficiency, maximize energy use. There would be some privacy issues involved, but the routines of everyone in the household would be mapped out in this integrated living solution. We would know when the student has to leave to go to school, the bus would come on time, or this is an ideal utopia world, but we would also know when the children have to get to school, when they have to leave school, things like do the older folks need to go for their exercise classes, do they have, all these routines would be mapped so that we know where everyone is at any one time, and that's also safety for all. We were also talking about religiosity and how to bring about unity in the population as a challenge. And we were talking about the unity in the scenarios of the ocean and mountain perspective, because there's increasingly more information access to all. It is getting harder and harder to govern. So as mayor, I think that there should be increasing transparency, especially in politics, and also in Singapore. For the government to know that it should be a given that the population would be educated and increasingly more educated and have access to information, whether false news or true. Let me see, what else did we want to say? Is there anything else the team wants to add on? No? Okay. Okay, that's it.
All right, thank you. Thank you once again for taking the time to spend with us here in Shell, and also for your ideas. When we released the scenario on net zero emission, we released it under a title of Better Living in a Healthy Planet. And I'm really encouraged by the discussions today that you can see that the opportunities and the challenges ahead are huge and complex. And an integrated and collaborative approach will allow us to get there, to better living in a healthy planet. So thank you very much. And let me hand over to Claire to close.
Thank you. First, big thank you again to Swee Chen for inspiring us with all these questions and questioning the city of the future. Thank you, Vanessa. Where is Vanessa? For organizing this and bringing us all together. Thank you all for this morning of fruitfulness. I just want to make a few points here. I think the reason why we put, I think Swee Chen put a female mayor, although I don't know why we would have a male impersonation. I truly believe that the world can move towards adopting the female lens of looking at reality. Not that we are better. That is definitely the way we are conditioned and the problems that we have to look after. We have a lens of looking at the world. You put on a pair of pink glasses, you see the world in pink. You see the world in blue, you put on a blue lens. So the whole idea of a female mayor planted in that construct is that we adopt a female lens of asking the questions and seeking the solutions of the reality. That may be different. Being different doesn't mean it's more superior. It's just that we are giving alternative. And I hope we'll continue to question that. And we ask of women, what are your first principles in visioning the city? Do you have a first principles? And as the mayor of Perth, and could align with what was being said as we Googled, I like the idea and I concur with the idea, maybe I would increase the percentages of 28% by 2030 of carbon emissions. And then I would maybe say that every home will have a solar energy. And I will say, the one vision, I hope every home will have broadband, that women who are homemakers can have internet access to anything. And I hope that every home, 40%, where women can actually work at home on flex. And I hope that every organization will allow a 1 year maternity leave and maybe 6 months paternity leave. Now, all this is an outcome of my discussion just 5 days ago in London in a vehicle called Women 20. You heard of the G20 group, the economic forum. We are now inaugural, going to have a paper in November 2018 called W20, where we put our wish list of what the future portends and what we wish for a so-called equitable society. And these are some of the... So that vision for what the ideal city is, not just problem solving, is visioning. Because if you set out to do 28% emission and I want to go up to 30%, what must I do as the mayor to set the measures to achieve 30%, to achieve 50%? What must I do to ensure that top 50% management are women, or to ensure that 50% at boards are women? Already, this is being set on motion. The Diversity Action Committee that I'm sitting in, we're hoping for 20% maybe in 10 years' time. Very slow. Whereas in Europe, they're now talking about 40%. The two boards that I sit on in Europe are looking at 50%. So that we must set targets. So whether it is your own life, your personal habits, or whether it is in companies, your organizational policies, or whether it is state, the governance and planning, we have to set the targets. If not, we will never reach there. Because what it means is budget allocation and bringing the resources to make sure that it's implementation plan, and then to have the execution by all to achieve the targets. I'm very happy that Singapore, this year, all companies, public listed companies, have to make a report called the Sustainability Report based on the 17 SDGs. Before, for 15 years, and I was the founder for Singapore Compact, Swee Chen now is now the president of this, we could talk to the house, come home and floors were dry and tell companies to do CSR. And they say, why? And now, standards. We set the 17 SDGs, we get companies to study, and we have training for them to how to report it. And this exercise, I've done that for 15 years, but this year I had to specially get a PhD and a special resource to format the report in the manner that was asked of us. The materiality of the 17 matters. And it's a very good process of engagement of the mind and in behavior. So I think Singapore is on track. We really wanting to achieve certain outcome. And I hope that you will all start thinking of not just solving the problem, but ask, why do you want to solve the problem that way? What is it that you want to achieve at the end of it? So today's visioning of the various cities and all the problems, it's extremely interesting. And I think Singapore hopes to be possibility that sustainability hub to share information and to learn from in the region. And I think Shell is one of the few companies that's leading the way, and so are many other agencies in Singapore, from the Sustainability Cities outfit and others who are looking at renewable energy and sharing information with the region. Because we are refocusing South Asia. Why? Because whatever that's done badly in Indonesia, we get it, like the haze. And therefore we do need to share. So in the end, it is about leadership. And the female leadership and the female mayor can create the difference in partnership with the men by sharing our lens and our perspectives of addressing problems and solutions. Some will say that, while you set all these targets for women or for the disabled, does that undermine meritocracy? It should be based on merit and not on gender, on age, I can only say, for so long, it has been the male agenda. For so long, it has always been for the elitists and the able-bodied. It's time we give it a break and let the others have a chance to share. And we're not saying it's regardless of merit. We are saying we broaden our lens to be inclusive, to have more different people. And that it only adds to the sophistication and the interests of the discussion. So thank you all for giving such wonderful ideas. I think notes have been taken and that we will take home. And then the next topic, Michael Koh, again one more on sustainable cities. You will hear what urban planners have envisioned for the future city of Singapore. Now, the urban planners, for until now, many of them are male. The architects in Singapore, many are male. The manufacturers of cars, many are male. So people are beginning to question, why are car seats made in such a way small women like me cannot reach the brake? Why are buses in such a way that we cannot lift wheelchairs up to get in? So the ergonomics have all been male specific. It's time to address the way we design to fit for purpose different pockets of people. So these are all the interesting questions. And I welcome you. It is going to be in 21st. We will send an email to the next one. It will be another exciting one. So today is a predictor for the next discussion. Go back, do Google and research more of your visioning of the city of the future. Raise all these questions and pose these questions to us as well as students, as well as in the next forum, so that we can enrich ourselves and also enrich the conversation. Thank you very much.